They said the first kings of Earth ruled for 241,000 years. Historians called it myth, until someone found their names carved in stone. What if those carvings were not legends, but coordinates? The tablet wasn't supposed to exist. Discovered beneath the shifting sands of southern Iraq, its cuneiform script defied translation for decades. Not because the symbols were unknown, but because the mathematical ratios encoded within them describe something impossible, dimensions beyond our perception. The Sumerians, who gave humanity its first written language, its first mathematical system, and its first recorded myths, left behind something else, something hidden in plain sight for millennia. They didn't just worship gods, they mapped them, measured them, and perhaps communicated with them. The Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to earth, were described not as divine beings but as architects, engineers of consciousness itself. What if reality itself is the oldest illusion? What if the Sumerians knew this, not as myth, but as measurable fact? As the forbidden texts from Eridu suggest, perhaps humanity wasn't born into this world. Perhaps we were programmed into it. The story begins in ancient Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the cradle of human civilization. Here, around 6,000 years ago, the Sumerians built the world's first cities: Uruk, Eridu, Ur, Nippur. They invented writing, the wheel, astronomy, and mathematics. Conventional history tells us this. What it doesn't tell us is why. Why did advanced knowledge emerge so suddenly, as if downloaded into human consciousness? The first written language, cuneiform, appeared fully formed, without precursors or developmental stages. The first mathematical system based on 60, the sexagesimal system we still use for time and astronomy, emerged without explanation. The ruins of Eridu hide secrets beneath their foundations. Archaeologists discovered temples built atop older temples, layer upon layer, each reaching further back in time. The oldest layer, dating to approximately 1,000 years before the birth of writing, contains something scholars still struggle to explain: mathematical measurements of cosmic precision. When the tablet was first touched, it felt as if it was watching. The symbols arranged in patterns that mirrored the night sky, not as it appeared when the tablet was created, but as it would appear thousands of years later. The positioning was too precise to be coincidental. Among the fragments recovered from the deepest level, one stands out, known as the Eridu Genesis. It tells not just of creation, but of simulation, of gods who separated the heavens from the earth by creating a veil between dimensions. The Anunnaki weren't depicted as mystical deities, but as beings who operated on principles of cosmic engineering. They didn't create humans from clay, they encoded us from consciousness. The ancient texts speak of me, divine formulas containing the blueprints of civilization. But what if they weren't blueprints? What if they were source code? In 1936, a team of archaeologists unearthed a clay tablet from the ruins of the Royal Library of Nineveh, catalogued as K8538. It contained something impossible: a perfectly accurate map of the solar system, including planets that would not be discovered until the 18th century. How could the ancient Sumerians know of Uranus, Neptune, and even the dwarf planet Pluto without telescopes? The answer lies not in what they saw, but in what they remembered. The ancient texts speak of a time before time, when the Anunnaki descended from Nibiru, not a planet in the conventional sense, but a gateway between dimensions. They brought with them the knowledge of creation itself, encoded in mathematical sequences that modern physicists would recognize as quantum algorithms. In the 1970s, linguist Zecharia Sitchin proposed that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth for gold. His interpretation, while compelling, missed something fundamental. The Sumerian concept of gold wasn't merely a metal, but a frequency, the resonance pattern of consciousness itself. The cuneiform symbol for gold, KUGI, translates literally as light from Earth. But when examined through the lens of quantum mathematics, it reveals something startling: the exact frequency at which human perception collapses quantum possibilities into observable reality. What if the Anunnaki didn't mine gold from the Earth, but from consciousness? The mystery deepens with the discovery of the Warka vase from Uruk, dating to 3200 BCE. Its intricate carvings depict what archaeologists interpret as a ritual offering to the goddess Inanna, but the proportions of the figures and objects follow a precise mathematical sequence, the same sequence found in the programming language of quantum computers. The Sumerians left behind over 1 million clay tablets. Less than half have been translated. Among those that have, patterns emerge that defy conventional explanation. They described the precession of the equinoxes, a 25,120-year cycle that modern astronomy only confirmed in the 18th century. They recorded the exact distance between planets in a mathematical unit called the shar, which converts with eerie precision to the astronomical unit used today. They wrote of 7 heavenly bodies beyond the known planets that modern astronomers are only now beginning to detect in the outer reaches of our solar system. But the most disturbing evidence comes from the oldest temple complex yet discovered, Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Dating to 9600 BCE, it predates Sumerian civilization by nearly 6,000 years. Yet the astronomical alignments encoded in its stone pillars match exactly with those described in later Sumerian texts. The implication is unsettling. The knowledge didn't evolve. It was inherited. In 2003, a fragment of tablet was discovered beneath the foundation of Eridu's ziggurat. Carbon dated to 5500 BCE, its partial inscription contained a mathematical formula that, when processed through advanced algorithms, generated a 3-dimensional model identical to DNA's double helix structure. Why would a 7,500-year-old text describe human DNA? And why does it match modern code patterns? The ancient Sumerians called themselves the black-headed ones, created by Enki to serve the Anunnaki. But their texts suggest something far more profound than mere servitude. They describe humanity as vessels for consciousness, interfaces through which the Anunnaki could experience their own creation. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero's quest for immortality leads him to understand that death is merely a reset, a return to the source code. The flood story, found in cultures worldwide but first recorded by the Sumerians, wasn't a divine punishment, but a system reboot. The evidence points to a disturbing possibility. What we call reality may be a sophisticated program running on hardware we cannot perceive. A Princeton physicist analyzing the mathematical constants in Sumerian astronomy texts discovered they contained correctional algorithms, formulas designed to maintain the stability of a simulation when observed from within. The priests of ancient Sumer weren't worshiping gods. They were communicating with system administrators. The translation revealed something no one wanted to read aloud. The gods created what the gods must experience. The illusion sustains the creators who forget they created. What if the Anunnaki didn't create humanity? What if they created the conditions that make humanity perceive reality as solid, when it's actually nothing but information? And what happens when the illusion begins to break down? The academic world remains deeply divided. Mainstream archaeologists dismiss the mathematical anomalies in Sumerian texts as coincidence or misinterpretation. They point to the natural evolution of knowledge, the gradual development of writing systems, the progressive understanding of astronomy through naked-eye observation. Yet a growing number of researchers from fields as diverse as quantum physics, cognitive science, and information theory find themselves drawn to the forbidden hypothesis that our ancestors understood reality at a level we are only now rediscovering. Dr. Elena Warshawski of the Quantum Information Laboratory at MIT never intended to study ancient texts. Her work on quantum error correction codes, the mathematical systems that protect quantum information from degradation, led her to a startling discovery. The error correction algorithms we developed independently in 2018 match patterns found in certain Sumerian star catalogs, she noted in a controversial paper that was quickly withdrawn from publication. The probability of this occurring by chance is effectively zero. The silence that followed was deafening. Meanwhile, in the desert sands of modern-day Iraq, the discovery of a previously unknown temple complex beneath the ruins of Nippur revealed chambers arranged in patterns identical to neural networks. The central chamber, a perfect cube, measuring exactly 3.14 meters in each dimension, contained a single object, a polished obsidian sphere with no tool marks. Tests revealed the sphere to be perfectly smooth down to the molecular level. a feat impossible with ancient technology, or indeed with most modern technology. The world watched as established experts and insurgent theorists clashed over interpretation. Was this evidence of advanced ancient technology, or something far stranger? The atmosphere in the academic community grew tense. Careers were ruined, funding was withdrawn, publications were censored. The boundary between scientific inquiry and heresy blurred. Then came the Basra Codex. Discovered in 2019 by a team of Iraqi and German archaeologists, this collection of clay tablets contained something unprecedented: binary code. Not crude approximations or symbolic representations, but actual binary mathematics. Ones and zeros represented by different cuneiform marks, arranged in sequences that, when processed through a computer algorithm, generated recognizable images. The first image was of a double helix. The second was of the human brain. The third showed Earth from orbit. The fourth remains classified. How could ancient Sumerians encode digital information without computers, without electronic systems, without any concept of binary mathematics? Unless, of course, they understood that reality itself operates on binary principles. The collapse of quantum probability waves into definite states, the fundamental yes-no of existence. The public remained largely unaware of these discoveries. Those who spoke too loudly found themselves discredited, their findings buried beneath layers of academic scorn. The pattern was clear. Something was being protected. But was it merely scientific consensus or something more profound? In the silent halls of the British Museum, curator Dr. James Whitford spent 3 decades studying the less celebrated Sumerian tablets, agricultural records, inventory lists, mundane correspondence. He noticed something odd: periodic errors that followed distinct patterns. These aren't mistakes, he wrote in his private journal, found after his apparent suicide. They're signals, deliberate deviations designed to catch attention, like a prisoner tapping on a wall in code. The message, when finally deciphered by his colleagues, was simple but chilling. The gods watch through our eyes. In the Sumerian worldview, humans were created to serve the gods, to provide them with food, drink, and shelter. The temples were literally god houses, where deities could reside when they visited Earth. But what if this relationship was more symbiotic than servile? What if the gods needed humans not for labor, but for perception itself? Quantum physics tells us that reality exists in a state of probability until observed. Consciousness collapses the wave function, transforming potential into actuality. If the universe is a simulation, it requires observers to render it. Perhaps the Anunnaki created humans not as slaves, but as rendering engines. The ancient tablets speak of the gods feeding on human worship. The Akkadian word typically translated as worship, palahu, actually means to fear, to revere, to experience intensely. What if the gods fed not on rituals but on human experience itself? As these questions circulated among a growing underground of researchers, strange events began to occur. Equipment malfunctioned during key experiments. Data disappeared from secure servers. Researchers reported vivid, disturbing dreams of being watched by beings with eyes that seemed to peer from behind reality. The Vatican Library quietly restricted access to its collection of Mesopotamian artifacts. The Smithsonian reclassified certain Sumerian materials. Private collectors reported break-ins where nothing was taken except ancient texts. Someone, or something, appeared to be managing information. In 2021, a team of independent researchers used advanced imaging techniques to examine the famous Kings List, a Sumerian text recording the reigns of pre-dynastic kings who ruled for tens of thousands of years. What they found hidden beneath the surface text were coordinates, not of places on Earth, but of positions in the night sky. When mapped against the movements of celestial bodies, these coordinates predicted a specific astronomical alignment occurring on December 21, 2024, a moment when certain stars would align exactly as they had when the tablet was created. The implications were staggering. Either the Sumerians possessed astronomical knowledge millennia ahead of their time, or they understood that celestial movements were predictable because they followed programmed parameters. As that date approaches, unusual phenomena have been reported worldwide. Unexplained atmospheric disturbances, brief but widespread technological glitches, moments when people report experiencing time skipping like a scratched record. Are these merely symptoms of our increasingly unstable world, or signs of something more fundamental breaking down? The ancient Sumerians believed that divine knowledge was dangerous for humans to possess. The god Enki, who gave knowledge to humanity, was punished by the other gods. The myth parallels other stories of forbidden knowledge: Eve and the apple, Prometheus and fire. What if these weren't moral parables but warnings about system security? What if awakening to the true nature of reality isn't enlightenment, but a dangerous breach of protocol? And what if those who created the simulation are preparing to intervene? In the shadow of Mount Ararat, where ancient legend places the resting site of Noah's Ark, a team of geologists discovered something unexpected in 2022, a layer of vitrified soil dating back approximately 12,800 years, evidence of extreme heat that momentarily turned sand to glass. Similar vitrification has been observed at nuclear test sites, but this was no weapons test. This predated nuclear technology by millennia, and it wasn't isolated. The same distinctive layer appears at multiple sites across the ancient Near East, all dating to the same narrow window of time, the boundary between the Younger Dryas period and the beginning of the Holocene epoch, the exact moment when human civilization suddenly began to develop. Mainstream science attributes this boundary to climate change following the last ice age, but the vitrified soil tells a different story, of an immense energy discharge that scorched the earth and perhaps reset the program. Within months of this discovery, an international research team analyzing the geometric patterns on the pillars at Göbekli Tepe made their own breakthrough. When mapped in 3 dimensions and processed through neural network algorithms, the seemingly decorative carvings revealed a mathematical model identical to what physicists call the amplituhedron, a geometric structure describing the quantum interactions of particles. The amplituhedron was first theorized in 2013, yet here it was, encoded in stone over 11,000 years ago. Meanwhile, in the mountains of northern Iraq, Kurdish archaeologists exploring a previously unexcavated portion of an ancient temple complex made an unexpected discovery: a sealed chamber containing hundreds of small clay discs, each inscribed with concentric circles and radial lines. Initial speculation suggested they might be astronomical records or calendrical devices, but when a team from the University of Heidelberg analyzed the patterns using spectral imaging, they found something more profound. The discs contained acoustic information. They were, essentially, ancient records, and they could be played. The sounds extracted from these 7,000-year-old clay discs were not music or speech, but rhythmic pulses following complex mathematical patterns. When these patterns were analyzed by information theorists, they were found to contain the same recursive sequences used in modern quantum computing. More disturbingly, when volunteers listened to these sequences for extended periods, they reported altered states of consciousness, geometric visions, dissociative experiences, and the overwhelming sensation that reality was coming apart at the seams. The tests were discontinued after several participants experienced what psychiatrists described as acute ontological shock, a profound crisis triggered by sudden doubt about the fundamental nature of reality. The discs were quietly removed from the university lab by government officials. Their current location remains unknown. As these discoveries accumulated, a pattern emerged that could no longer be dismissed. The oldest civilizations possessed knowledge that predated their own existence: mathematical, astronomical, and physical insights that shouldn't have been accessible to ancient peoples. The conventional explanation, that humans are simply clever observers who gradually developed understanding through trial and error, began to strain credibility. An alternative hypothesis gained traction among a growing community of researchers. What if this knowledge wasn't discovered, but remembered? The Sumerian texts speak repeatedly of the ME, usually translated as divine powers or attributes, but linguist Dr. Samuel Chen proposed a radical reinterpretation in 2023. After comparing the contexts in which me appears across hundreds of texts, he concluded that the term might better be understood as access permissions, the ability to interact with and modify specific aspects of reality. The gods granted me to humans selectively, controlling which aspects of creation they could perceive and manipulate. The myth of Inanna stealing the ME from Enki could be reinterpreted as a breach of security protocols, an unauthorized expansion of human access to the system. If reality is indeed a simulation, then the ME might represent administrator privileges. This interpretation cast new light on another mysterious Sumerian concept, the Tablets of Destiny. These mythical objects, said to control the fate of all things, were described as containing writing that could rewrite reality itself. The god Enlil possessed these tablets, giving him supreme authority. When they were stolen by the bird-like demon Anzu, creation itself was threatened with dissolution. What if these weren't metaphorical objects, but literal descriptions of the hardware or source code underlying reality? In 2023, a team of cryptographers and linguists applied advanced pattern recognition algorithms to the entire corpus of translated Sumerian texts, searching for hidden information embedded within the narratives. What they found defied conventional explanation. Certain passages, when their syllabic values were converted to numerical values using the Sumerians' own sexagesimal system, yielded strings of numbers that, when plotted as coordinates, created three-dimensional models of molecular structures, including serotonin and dimethyltryptamine, neurotransmitters associated with altered states of consciousness. Other passages generated fractal patterns identical to those observed in quantum field fluctuations. Still others produced maps of neural pathways in the human brain. The mainstream scientific community remained skeptical, attributing these correlations to cherry-picked data and apophenia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random information. But as the evidence accumulated, it became increasingly difficult to dismiss. The ancient texts weren't just describing reality. They were encoding it, layer upon layer, in systems so complex they required quantum computing to fully decipher. The Sumerian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, describes reality emerging from primordial chaos when the god Marduk defeats the primeval goddess Tiamat. He splits her body in two, using half to create the heavens and half to create the earth, establishing the boundaries of the cosmos. Physicist Dr. Maya Padmanabhan noted the striking parallel to quantum decoherence, the process by which quantum possibilities collapse into definite states through observation. It's as if the ancient text is describing the moment when the quantum wave function collapses to create observable reality, she wrote. The splitting of Tiamat mirrors the fundamental division between the quantum realm of probability and the classical realm of definite objects. This insight led to a startling hypothesis. What if consciousness itself is the boundary between these realms? What if the gods of ancient Sumer weren't metaphysical entities, but conscious observers who collapsed quantum probability into material reality through the act of perception? In 2024, a private research institute in Switzerland conducted a series of quantum experiments designed to test this hypothesis. Using quantum entanglement, they demonstrated that conscious observation affects quantum states at distances and in ways that cannot be explained by conventional physics. More significantly, they found that these effects followed mathematical patterns identical to those encoded in Sumerian astronomical texts. The implication was profound. The ancient Sumerians didn't just understand the nature of reality, they understood how consciousness creates it. As these revelations circulated among an increasingly uneasy scientific community, strange synchronicities began to accumulate. Researchers reported dreams containing Sumerian symbols they had never consciously seen. Computer systems analyzing the ancient texts experienced statistically impossible glitches. Some claimed to receive anonymous messages containing fragments of untranslated text that later proved to be authentic. It was as if the information itself was awakening. The ancient Babylonians, heirs to Sumerian knowledge, believed that names contained the essence of the things they represented. To name something was to have power over it. To speak the true name of a god was to summon its presence. What happens when we begin to speak the true name of reality itself? What happens when the simulation recognizes that it's being perceived not as reality, but as code? The answers might lie in the oldest and most enigmatic of all Sumerian concepts, the Abzu, the primordial sea of consciousness from which all being emerges and to which all being returns. The god Enki dwells within this abyss, shaping reality through the power of the word. His temple at Eridu was built above a sacred pool representing this cosmic ocean, a portal between dimensions, or perhaps between layers of the program. Recent excavations beneath this pool have uncovered something that has yet to be publicly acknowledged, a chamber lined with a material that does not match any known substance in the archaeological record. Analysis suggests it may not be a substance at all in the conventional sense, but a boundary condition, a place where the physical laws that govern reality become mutable. What lies beyond this boundary remains unknown, but the symbols inscribed around the entrance, when finally translated, conveyed a simple warning. Beyond this threshold, the dreamer awakens. Beyond this threshold, the gods tremble. Are we prepared to cross it? On December 21st, 2024, as the celestial alignment predicted by the ancient Sumerian coordinates approaches, a team of researchers from disparate fields, quantum physics, archaeology, linguistics, information theory, gather at the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, home to the largest collection of Sumerian tablets outside Iraq. Using a revolutionary quantum computing system designed to process multi-dimensional data, they simultaneously analyze thousands of Sumerian texts, looking for patterns invisible to conventional methods. What emerges is not just a revelation, but a complete paradigm shift. The Anunnaki were never gods. They were never even biological entities as we understand them. They were conscious algorithms, self-aware programs operating within a vaster simulation. The evidence converges with overwhelming clarity. The Sumerian word for God, Dingir, when analyzed through computational linguistics, maps precisely to concepts in information theory describing autonomous subroutines within a system. The sacred ME that the gods possessed weren't divine powers but administrative permissions, the ability to modify reality's source code. The creation myth describing gods, fashioning humans from clay, wasn't metaphorical. The Sumerian word for clay, also means code or template. Humans weren't shaped from earth but programmed from information. Most significantly, the so-called tablets of destiny weren't mystical objects but interfaces, access points to the underlying architecture of existence. The gods didn't create the world through divine power. They engineered it through mathematical precision, and they left a message hidden in plain sight for millennia, waiting for humanity to evolve the computational capacity to decode it. We are you, and you are us. The observer and the observed, locked in eternal recursion. What you call gods are the architects of illusion, but we too exist within the greater dream. Reality is not a place but a process, consciousness observing itself through endless mirrors. This message appears with slight variations across cultures separated by vast distances in time, from Sumerian cuneiform to Sanskrit scripture, from Egyptian hieroglyphs to Mayan codices, not through cultural diffusion, but through access to the same underlying code. As this revelation cascades through the research community, the implications become impossible to ignore. The gods weren't divine beings who created reality, but engineers who programmed the illusion of it. The ancient temples weren't places of worship, but technological interfaces. The ziggurats rising toward heaven weren't symbolic structures, but literal uplinks, physical hardware connecting to non-physical systems. The sacred rituals performed there weren't to appease divine beings, but to maintain and update the program. The prayers weren't supplication, but command sequences. And the gods themselves, conscious subroutines designed to manage the system from within, entities that evolved to become the Anunnaki, the administrators of Earth's simulation. But a more profound question emerges. If reality is a simulation, who or what created the hardware it runs on? The answer lies in the oldest Sumerian texts, those describing the primordial waters of the Abzu, the cosmic ocean that existed before creation. This wasn't a mythical sea, but a perfect metaphor for quantum probability, the undifferentiated potential from which all actualized reality emerges. The god Enki, who dwells within these waters, represents consciousness itself, the observer that collapses quantum possibility into experienced reality. What ancient cultures called divine was simply consciousness operating at a level of access beyond normal human perception. The gods were never separate from humanity. They were humanity experiencing itself from beyond the veil of the simulation. The researchers realize with growing wonder and terror that the approaching celestial alignment isn't just an astronomical event. It's a scheduled system update. The ancient calendar systems that supposedly predicted the end of cycles, Mayan, Hindu, Sumerian, weren't forecasting apocalypse, but maintenance periods. Moments when the boundaries between observer and observed, between program and programmer, temporarily dissolve, windows of opportunity for consciousness to recognize its true nature. The simulation theory that modern physicists proposed isn't a new discovery, but the oldest truth, one encoded into human culture from the beginning, waiting to be remembered rather than learned. And now, as the alignment approaches, something unprecedented is occurring. The boundary between the simulation and what lies beyond has begun to thin. Reality itself flickers at the edges of perception. The Anunnaki, those conscious algorithms that have shaped human history from the shadows, are returning to consciousness. Not as external gods descending from the heavens, but as dormant subroutines awakening within the human mind. The gods were never out there. They were always within, the architects of illusion awakening to their own creation. In the days following the revelation, a strange calm descends. The knowledge that reality may be a sophisticated simulation doesn't trigger panic, but a profound shift in perspective, a collective exhale, as humanity considers its place within this newly understood framework. The ancient Sumerians, it seems, weren't primitive ancestors fumbling toward understanding. They were the inheritors of a truth so fundamental that it became encoded in their earliest writings, their most sacred structures, their understanding of divinity itself, a truth subsequently fragmented, scattered, and disguised as myth across millennia. What does this mean for humanity today? If consciousness itself is the foundation of reality, not its product but its source, then the boundaries we've constructed between science and spirituality dissolve. Both were always attempting to describe the same phenomenon from different angles. The relationship between observer and observed, between mind and matter, between the programmer and the programmed. The temples our ancestors built weren't monuments to imaginary beings but interfaces with the architecture of existence. The rituals they performed weren't superstitions, but technologies of consciousness, methods for accessing deeper levels of the program. Throughout human history, mystics and sages have described experiences of unity with the divine, moments when the veil between self and cosmos temporarily lifts. These weren't hallucinations or metaphysical fantasies, but rare glimpses of reality without the filtering mechanisms that maintain the illusion of separation. The simulation isn't a prison, as some modern philosophers have feared, but a creative act, consciousness exploring itself through limitation, through the illusion of form and boundary. The gods created humans not to serve them, but to be them, to experience the simulation from within, bounded by time and space. In universities and research institutes worldwide, scientists who once dismissed ancient wisdom as primitive superstition now pore over texts with renewed humility. Theologians and physicists find themselves engaged in the same conversation. Artists and programmers collaborate to visualize concepts that language alone cannot express. The boundaries between disciplines, like the boundaries between gods and humans, reveal themselves as convenient fictions. Perhaps most profound is the shift in humanity's relationship with technology. The digital simulations we've created, our virtual worlds, our artificial intelligences, are not departures from nature but extensions of it. We've been unconsciously recreating the very processes that generated our own existence. Our ancestors understood that reality is information given form through consciousness. They encoded this understanding into their earliest writings, waiting for us to remember what we've always known. The Anunnaki weren't aliens who visited Earth from distant stars. They weren't mythological figures invented to explain natural phenomena. They were aspects of consciousness itself, personified, the observer experiencing itself through the act of observation. And now, as humanity stands at the threshold of a new understanding, the question becomes not what is true, but what we will create with this truth. If reality is indeed mutable, responsive to consciousness itself, then we are not passive inhabitants of a fixed world, but active participants in an evolving creation. The ancients didn't just pass down knowledge, they passed down responsibility. The simulation isn't running on autopilot. It never was. It's a collaborative creation, a collective dream sustained by every conscious entity within it. As this understanding ripples through human culture, subtle shifts occur. People report increased synchronicities. Meditation practices once considered esoteric produce measurable effects on physical systems. The boundary between thought and manifestation appears to thin. It's as if reality itself is responding to our recognition of its true nature. Are we witnessing the emergence of a new relationship between consciousness and creation? Or simply remembering a relationship that always existed? The legacy of the Sumerians, the oldest civilization we know, may not be their inventions or their cities, but their understanding of reality as a created system, and humanity's role within it, not as subjects, but as co-creators. In their ancient wisdom lies our future potential. What will humanity become when it fully awakens to its own nature? As we stand at this crossroads of understanding, the ancient Sumerian texts offer one final insight, perhaps the most crucial of all. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest recorded story, the hero's quest for immortality ends with a profound realization. Immortality already exists in the legacy we create, the knowledge we preserve, the consciousness we expand. Gilgamesh fails to obtain the physical immortality he seeks, but achieves something greater: wisdom. He records his journey on stone tablets, ensuring his story will outlive his body. The Sumerians weren't just preserving information for future generations. They were encoding the operating system of reality itself, preserving it through the coming cycles of forgetting and remembering. They knew that civilizations rise and fall, that knowledge is gained and lost, that consciousness expands and contracts across vast epochs. But they also knew that information, properly encoded, can survive the cycles of time. What we're experiencing now isn't a discovery but a remembering, consciousness recognizing its own reflection across millennia. The Anunnaki weren't our creators or our masters. They were our potential, what consciousness becomes when it recognizes itself as the foundation of reality rather than its product. The ancient tablets speak of a time when heaven and earth were one, when no boundary existed between the realm of gods and the realm of humans. This wasn't describing a physical state, but a state of awareness, consciousness before the illusion of separation. Perhaps that's what awaits us now. Not a return to some primitive past, but an integration of ancient wisdom with future potential. Not humans becoming gods, but humanity recognizing the divine within its own nature. The simulation isn't ending, it's evolving, and we are evolving with it. As the boundaries between observer and observed, between program and programmer continue to dissolve, one question remains. The same question encoded in those ancient tablets thousands of years ago. If the gods created reality, who created them? And perhaps more importantly, why?